Welcome. Hello, everybody. My name is Emily Bierman, and on behalf of Sotheby's and AIPAD, I am pleased to welcome you virtually to what promises to be a fascinating conversation that was inspired by our upcoming partnership with AIPAD in an auction that is entitled 4 Decades in Celebration of AIPAD. I am joined today on screen by a most impressive group of women, all of whom have been involved in dealing, collecting, or specializing in photographs since the birth of the modern market. It's nearly impossible for me to distill their accomplishments down into a few sentences, but bear with me, I am going to try and give you a little introduction. Joined by Lee Marks, who cut her teeth in the art world working at Marlborough Gallery in New York before opening Lee Marks Fine Art in 1981. She was a founding member of AIPAD in 1979 and later served as board president. As a consultant to Pierre Praxine, renowned curator of the Gilman Paper Company collection, she cataloged one of the finest photography collections ever built. Beginning in 1990 and over the next 20 years, Lee was consulting curator to the collector Howard Stein and his foundation, Joy of Giving Something, a portion of which you might recall was sold at Sotheby's in the landmark 2014 auction, 175 Masterworks, to celebrate 175 years of photography. Today, through Lee Marks Fine Art, she maintains a broad inventory of photography and has increasingly focused on supporting a select group of contemporary photographers. I am also joined by Sondra Gilman, who began collecting photography in 1972, simultaneously buying for herself and starting the collection of the aforementioned Gilman Paper Company. Later, she became a member of the board of the Aperture Foundation and was its first woman vice president. Sondra joined the board of the Whitney Museum in New York in 1979, and as the longest serving member of its board, her impact on the institution really cannot be overstated. She originated the museum's acquisition committee devoted to collecting 20th century American photography in 1991 and was chair of that committee until just last year. The photography curatorial chair and the photography gallery at the Breuer building here in New York were named for her. In the present Whitney, the study center is named for her, and photographs from her collection are on long-term loan to the museum. The personal collection that she has continued to build for more than 3 decades with her husband Celso Gonzalez Fala has been exhibited widely from New York to Jacksonville to Lausanne to Barcelona, and is the subject of several terrific books. And I'm also joined by my dear former colleague, Denise Bethel, who spent an astonishing 35 years in the auction business. First at Swan Galleries and then at Sotheby's. She set countless new records for artists like Edward Weston, Southworth and Hawes, and Ray and Diane Arbus, and notably broke both the $1 million mark and the $2 million mark for a single photograph with the sale of Edward Spigen's The Pond Moonlight in 2006. Before leaving Sotheby's at the end of 2014, she made sure to break one more record, hammering down the $21.3 million sale of 175 Masterworks to celebrate 175 years of photography, a record for any photographs collection at auction, and one that I know we in the market will be chasing for years to come. She is now an independent advisor, writer, and lecturer based in New York City and her native Richmond, Virginia. So now just a bit of housekeeping before we dive in. As I mentioned, today's discussion was inspired by Sotheby's upcoming auction 4 Decades in Celebration of AIPAD, which will be open for bidding from the 15th through the 21st of December. So mark your calendars. For more information about the sale, please visit sotheby's.com/photographs. Our discussion today will be hopefully lively, but will last about 45 minutes, at which point we will be answering some of your questions, which you can submit at any time, starting right now. underneath your video screen, you should see a web form where you can enter your name and question in the respective boxes and click submit. We all look forward to engaging with your questions and comments a little bit later in the hour. So not to take up any more time with our introductions, I'm just going to dive right in. And this question just sort of is to set the scene, take us back to the beginning of the market. So Lee, I'm curious, AIPAD itself was born in the early days of the photographs market. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like and how AIPAD came to be?
I'm going to start right at the beginning, Emily. After an initial spark in Rochester, New York, at a 1978 symposium that included a small photo fair and auction and was attended by curators, collectors, and photography dealers, the idea of AIPAD was ignited. At the fair, the 35 plus participating dealers were permitted to hang one framed photograph and otherwise were consigned to tabletop display. At the end of the first year, in 1979, AIPAD had acquired 61 members in the United States, Canada, and Europe. Our first president was Los Angeles dealer Stephen White. In its early years, AIPAD produced small publications, presented educational programs, and gave annual awards in photography to photography legends like Andre Cortez in 1980, Bernice Abbott in 1981, Museum of Modern Art curator John Sarkowski in 1992. But our main activity has always been to produce a large and annual photography show, work represented by our member dealers. The show locations moved around. The first show was in 1980. It was at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City. We stayed at the Roosevelt for 5 years. And then with a growing membership coming from all over the US, plus Europe, we felt the need to test the waters in other parts of the US. We went to Houston, Texas in conjunction with the Houston Photo Fest, then San Francisco, then Washington, DC, and then back to New York and the New York Hilton in 1993. Finally, in 2006, with Bob Klein as president, we were finally able to break into our dream venue at the 7th Regiment Park Avenue Armory. Eventually, we even outgrew that space and moved to Pier 94. So here we are.
And so what we have been seeing on screen, if we can just flash back quickly to those images, these are photographs that Lee dug up in her archives from, I believe, the 1989 show. And just for everyone who's watching, who do we see? Who's pictured here? Some familiar faces.
Well, in the first picture, do you want to do it or should I?
No, if you want to chime in, yeah.
In the first picture, Hans Kraus seems to be running from Deborah Bell. And I can't tell whose booth it's in, but this shows the camaraderie of the AIPAD members. In the next picture, there's Hans again, and I'm in the middle, and my husband, John Depry, is laughing at some joke.
And the next image?
Of course, it's Willie Schaefer and Denise Bethel. Denise probably should talk about this.
Yes, this is a typical picture of Willie Schaefer and Denise Bethel. Willie has just got me to believe some outlandish story, which he typically would do, and I would always fall for it. And I think I note the look of triumph on his face, which indicates that I fell for it one more time.
You're not alone, Denise.
So we kind of have a broad overview of how AIPAD formed, what its emphasis was at the very beginning and now. And I'm curious, turning to the collector's perspective, taking a step away for a second from market. Sondra, so Sotheby's Photographs held its first sale in London in 1971. As I understand it, you started collecting in 1972 with three Eugène Atget photographs that you bought somehow for $700. What was it like collecting in those early days?
A desert. First of all, not only was the world not recognizing photography, but my parents were ready to send me to the booby hatch because they said on the first purchase, you spend $700 on 3 photographs. I mean, they were Atgets. And as I said, I kept saying, I just bought a masterpiece. I just bought a masterpiece. And they said, the men in the white coats will be here for you momentarily. So it was very lonely. It really was. And John Sikorsky was my mentor, and he was my only soulmate. He was the one that turned me on photography. But as I said, things got better.
They certainly did, and I'm sure, well, you know what they say about hindsight. And so we just switched to another image, which I think we can go to now. And this speaks to the auction market. So, Denise, you've been at this almost longer than anyone else and have fantastic stories to tell. Here we have an image that I think is from 1974 in London. Obviously some notable characters and certainly 3 men at the front. But how and why did you start with photographs?
Well, I basically, after leaving my master's degree in the history of British painting at the Courtauld Institute of Art, because there were so few courses in the history of photography, certainly back in the day, I just wanted a job in the auction business, I'll be frank. And the job that I found was a job at Swan Galleries, which had had its first photo auction in 1952, believe it or not. And this is what I wanted to be in the auction business. And aren't I lucky that I didn't get a job in the history of British painting, but a job in photography, which back in those days, really was the bottom of the art world ladder. So lack of experience didn't count against me. And it's just, what a wild ride from almost nothing to a very important, legitimate category of fine art.
How long were you an auctioneer for? We just saw an image, I think, of you from around 2003, which was the earliest one that I could find.
Yeah,
You've been doing it a long time.
I started auctioning at Swan. Probably my first auction at Swan was around 1985.
Wow.
And that's been a wild ride too. It's a lot of fun up there.
I bet it is. So this question is for anyone. Who was giving you advice at the beginning? I think, Sondra, you mentioned that your mentor was John Sikorsky. Denise and Lee, was there anyone who was giving you some advice?
Well, when I started at Swan, I was taking over from a wonderful man named David Margolis, who had started the photographs department for regular sales in the 1970s. And he was a great help to me, actually. The person who would always lead me down the garden path with false information, Willie Schaefer. He was a tremendous influence on how I looked at photographs. And then, of course, when I moved to Sotheby's, I had the, talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. I had the tradition of Ann Horton, who had really started the department, and then the amazing Beth Gates Waring. So I had a lot of help.
Lee, from a dealer's
too.
perspective?
It was a little bit different because my beginnings started at Marlboro, and that was at the end of 1970. And initially, I was selling prints at Marlboro with another woman in our department, and it was in 1975 that the Richard Avedon show occurred at Marlboro. And that was really the icebreaker for me, eventually leading to my career as a photography dealer. But I spent another few years at Marlboro, and during the next 3 years, we showed, after Avedon, we showed Bernice Abbott, and these were big shows too. They were taking up the big gallery. Bill Brandt, Versailles, Robert Frank, Louis Forer, and the last photographer before I left Marlboro was Irving Penn, which was an amazing, amazing show. And I was lucky to get to know these photographers and work with them. And selling was very different then. These photographs just walked out the door. And I have to say that when an Avedon print starts at $175, we had clients come in and buy multiple images of Avedon. And Sondra, you probably were one of them. I'm not sure. Anyway, Avedon was selling for $175. Bernice Abbott was selling for $300. Bill Brandt was selling for $500 or $600. When we got to Penn, he started at $1,000. And things certainly have changed. And also, it was great for me because these photographers actually visited the gallery. Bernice would come down from Maine. Versailles spent a month at the gallery signing his Secret Paris of the 30s book. And each day he would sit at a desk signing books. He didn't speak English, but chatting in French to people who were buying the book and young photographers who were absolutely in awe of him. So that was really a great experience, and I just got immersed.
But
So,
you told a funny anecdote yesterday about what the experience of being a woman, though, on a sales force in a gallery was like, and how that was different.
Yeah, one of the things at Marlboro, I was in the graphics gallery with another woman, Loretta Baum, and we were on salary. And the men in the gallery who were selling paintings and sculptures, but also eventually photographs, were on commission plus salary. But Loretta and I were not. And this had gone on for a while before Avedon, before we sort of rose to the occasion and changed things. But Loretta and I really lobbied to go on commission, and we did win. But it was an early introduction to that kind of difference in how women were treated.
I guess we can all thank you, though, for that advocacy that you were championing equal pay. So I appreciate that. But we've looked at them to a tiny extent, and looking at now. So Sondra, what's your experience over the last 40 plus years? Do you think that more women have entered the collecting side? Have more women become collectors of photography than when you started and were about to be taken away in a straitjacket?
Yes, of course. First of all, the fact that photography now is recognized of the art that it is encourages a lot of people to step in when before they would have been very, very nervous. And I think women have a lot more freedom. There is now much more recognition and encouragement for women. And I think that is giving them the courage to step in areas that they normally would have been too nervous about. And I think probably today, women collectors are as free and as self-satisfied with what they have and what they know. And I think it's a whole new world. And I wish I was born a little later so I didn't have to go through the very beginnings when we all had to struggle so much. But it's here now, and I'm thrilled to share it with all of you.
Yeah. Well, an area that certainly has had a lot of attention over the last couple of years is the representation of women artists or artists who happen to be women in the market overall. So in comparison to men. And a study that came out a year or two ago still accounts for women only making up a tiny fraction of the overall international art market. So Lee, I'm curious if you think that small fraction, this very tiny fraction, still also applies to women's representation within the photography field, or maybe is it a little bit more even in photography than it is, say, in contemporary painting?
You know, I really have no idea about that, because I don't think that the kind of studies that have been done in other media have been done for photography. I may be wrong, but I'm not aware of any, and maybe Denise or Sondra. I would guess that it's not quite as bad as 2%. Just looking around and knowing my colleagues and being conscious of photographers and what's out there. I don't think it's that bad. I think we're better.
Still have work to do, though, certainly.
Yeah, we absolutely do have work to do. And, you know, looking at my own roster, without really thinking about that, I'm almost 50-50. Maybe one more male photographer. But I really wasn't thinking about that. And you know, I was thinking about having people, you know, at first I just had American artists. And I thought, my God, I got to have European people. Then the women issue came up. Then I thought I really needed to have, you know, a more diverse, well, nationality, but just a more diverse stable of photographers. But you know, Sondra said something yesterday, and I absolutely agree with it, that I really don't give too much thought to that, because, you know, however much these labels relate to art, I don't want to lose sight of the object first. And it really doesn't matter who made it. You know, there should just be a blind test. But
you either have the eye or you don't. But.
Yeah, and you know, I am aware of the woman's issue, and it's very much on my mind.
So Sondra, we've talked on sort of sidebar extensively about your own collection and where you focused, and whether or not you have made an emphasis to focus on adding women into the collection over time, or if it just happened naturally. And it sounds like it definitely just happened naturally, but there were a couple of works bringing it back to our upcoming auction with AIPAD. And full disclosure, I did share with our panelists an anonymous list of the works that are coming to auction, so that there would be no bias as to which selections they wanted to make or talk about, without knowing who the gallery is, who represents the work. And so when we were looking at the list together, Sondra, two photographs really jumped out. The Imogen Cunningham unmade bed, and then the Sig Harvey of the pomegranate seeds. And they had personal resonance for you.
Yes, first of all, this haunts me. I mean, we have it in our collection. Before we bought it, we spent 20 years trying to find a vintage image of this. And finally, we found it at a Sotheby's auction. And it arouses so many questions. One, Why is the bed so rumpled? Was there a fight there? What is it? It just is disquieting. And then what is that lying on it? Is that a scissors? Was there violence? I have found this image absolutely haunting. And as I said, I looked for 20 years to find it, finally in a Sotheby's auction. And of course we bought it. And every time I look at it, I'm overwhelmed and I find I can't put it away. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say we do have a beautiful print of this image that is upcoming in the AIPAD auction of that Imogen Cunningham photograph, Unmade Bed. And here we have what was sort of a newer surprise for me, this work by Stig Harvey.
Well,
who I think you also did.
In a way, even though the images are so different, it really arouses the same questions. This is an enigma. First of all, the fact that this is all red reminds you of blood, even though the image isn't bloody. And then the child disappears. It has that one little hand on there. I find out that I never get tired of looking at this picture because it always raises questions. And I don't even want to put it away until I've solved the questions. But of course, she's a great photographer, and I'm not going to solve the questions at all. So I find this is an ongoing puzzle, and also a beautiful ongoing puzzle. That photograph is gorgeous. Does that answer?
Absolutely. So Denise, I shared this list with you, anonymous. Denise taught me you never choose favorites, but you did find a couple of photographs that I think intrigued you. Which photographs are they?
Well, given the fact that this is a panel about women, I did start looking at the whole list of things, and I questioned in my own mind, can we tell the difference? Is there a difference in a photograph taken by a woman versus a photograph taken by a man? And I'm going to say, and maybe I'll get clobbered later, but I think there can be some differences. One of the photographs that I love is the Helen Levitt of the two children on the sidewalk. This was taken in New York probably around 1940. Helen Levitt is famous for her pictures of children on the street. And I thought in my own mind of looking towards Sally Mann, her photograph of her daughter Jessie. And the one thing that I take away from these two photographs, I mean, these are photographs of children, and I know that there is a cliche about women being emotional and perhaps a bit romantic. And certainly these are photographs of children, and that you would think would bring us into some sort of romantic combination of emotion. And what strikes me about a lot of photographs by women are how clear-eyed and realistic and unromantic the pictures are. I think if you look at Jessie in the Sally Mann photograph, and you look at particularly the one without the mask in the Helen Levitt photograph, these are tough kids. And it reminds me of not I heard once. If you want an honest answer to a question, ask a 5-year-old. These are cherubs, these kids. And can you tell if a mother is taking a picture? I don't think you can, because of course Sally is a mother, took pictures of her kids. Helen Levitt didn't have any kids. And so that kind of knocks that out the window. But I love the unsentimentality of these pictures by women. They are direct. They are unromantic, and I think they present a very clear-eyed picture of two very resilient children. I also, should I stop here or?
Oh, I want to know about that third photograph.
Well, the third photograph is a personal favorite again. This is Mariana Cook's picture of Michelle and Barack Obama. And I feel as though I think that, again, this holds up with what I was saying about a clear-eyed, realistic, unsentimental view. And we have to remember that this picture was made in 1996. This is pre-Senator Obama. This is pre-President Obama. This was made in Chicago before any of the history that we associate with the Obamas had happened. And Mariana Cook has an incredible gift, in my opinion, for looking at people and seeing their character. And in this picture, I think you can see Barack Obama as the centered, calm person he turned out to be. And you can see Michelle, who's a little bit wary, just a little bit wary of perhaps her husband's ambitions. Maybe I'm picking up too much on what Barack has said recently about, in conjunction with his autobiography. She was a little bit wary of having him run. But when we think that this is 1996, I think of Mariana Cook's absolute gift for making a picture that stands the test of time. These are the same people, in my opinion. And again, that is part of her gift.
So in reverse, there are a number of photographs that are in the auction that are of women taken by men. And so one of my immediate picks and sort of an image that is very, very well liked generally is this Nicholas Mirai photograph of Frida Kahlo. And so I would ask the same question: would this portrait be different if it were taken by a woman as opposed to a man?
This is a tough question because, of course, we don't have a comparison with the pictures or with the artists I just talked about. I think this is a more masculine picture or portrayal of a woman. It's very, very beautiful. It looks like a painting. I would say that it is a little bit more realistic, a little bit more, what's the word I want? It's a little bit more idealistic of what Frida Kahlo perhaps looked like. Now, she loved this picture. Diego Rivera loved this picture. But it is very beautiful. And I'm not sure Frida Kahlo was always beautiful. So I think I would love to see how Sally Mann would have taken a picture of Frida Kahlo. I'd love to see how Helen Levitt would have taken a picture of Frida Kahlo. I especially would like to see how Mariana Cook would have taken a picture of Frida Kahlo. And of course, my dream picture would be Mariana Cook's picture of Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera together. Now that would be really something. So I think we are looking at two very different ways of approaching a subject. And as I say, I'm probably going to get clobbered for this, but it'll make for a good discussion.
Well, it's invent a time machine, so we can go back and have that couple portrait. I would absolutely love to see that. So for me, from the auction perspective, we've just come through offering works from the collection of Ginny Williams. We had an auction this past summer that was dedicated to her collection. We have an upcoming auction actually that opens this Friday, additional works that are from the collection. And so there you have, again, a woman who was both collecting acting as a gallerist in the 1980s, and also focusing on the market for women artists. And within her photography focus, women absolutely took center stage. So it seems to me that you also have this moment right now where there is greater market recognition for women artists, for women photographers. And so there are these, what we might say, unsung heroes of the photo history who are finally having their recognition and their due. In the Ginny Williams sale over the summer, we offered a photograph by Tina Madotti that was this beautiful, lush platinum print. And it totally, this is the one that's coming up actually in the AIPAD sale, but this is a photograph, again, by Tina Madotti that is certainly emblematic of her work, showing the people, showing the workforce, showing every day. But this is a work that I was keen to take into this auction based on the fact that over the last several years, you're seeing great growth for this artist who has, for the most part, had a much more limited output, and then also sometimes stands in the shadows of her mentor, lover, fellow photographer, Edward Weston. And then there is also the work of Dorothea Lang that I think is interesting to bring into the conversation, because Lang has been very much of discussion over this last couple of years, in no small part due to the fantastic retrospective that opened at the beginning of this year, I believe, at MoMA, and had a new monograph. And again, finally, the prices that we're seeing are really appreciating. We have, I believe, two works by Dorothea Lang upcoming in this AIPAD auction. This is one of the photographs. I think we have another image. This is another image, very different, obviously. And so, Sondra, I'm curious for you as a collector, where you see the markets really sort of taking off for photographers that you might have been following for a long time. What does that mean to you? Does it feel like a good thing, or is it limiting?
I'm sorry.
The market appreciation.
I'm sorry, would you
The market appreciation that we're seeing for women artists over the last several decades, certainly, but just some of the artists that I called out. I think when you and I were talking earlier, you were saying that it's great, the time has come, but it is also somewhat limiting for you.
You say it's limiting. What did you mean by that?
Whereas you might have been able to acquire several photographs for $700 in 1972.
Oh, you mean
they are now going to...
Don't even mention it.
Yeah. They are now going to maybe cost you a couple extra zeros.
Well, I think that if you're a forerunner of anything, it's very, very difficult. For you're swimming upstream. And I think all the women here have gone through the same thing. But you know what? Whatever the problems were, we've made it, girls. We've really made it. And our dreams and our philosophy of photography has finally come true. We could all sit back and say, I don't believe it. And yes, I think it was very hard, but it's there. And we now I think we can sit back for at least 10 minutes.
We can reap the benefits, if you will. So after all these many years of experience, Lee, there's still surprises that you find when you when you looked at the list? Did anything jump out at you?
Yeah, I mean, I sent you, when you asked about that, and I forgot to give it to you right away the other day, and I think I sent you 15.
Yep.
So you said to send 3, and I sent 15. And one of them was actually someone who John and I have collected. Well, we bought one print, but who's not all that well known in the U.S., and that's Colin Jones.
Mm-hmm.
I love the print that's coming up in the auction, and it's very haunting and very. It's not. Whoops! I should start.
Yeah, that is the. There we go.
Yeah. I just think that this photograph it's such a narrative. And the photograph that John and I bought is as haunting as this, but the way he's built up those women into that apex at the top with the woman, and I think it's a woman because I've only seen these in very small examples, but in the white.
It's great storytelling.
The whole composition of that is amazing with the white jackets and dresses and shirts, and the women themselves, and the open door and the steps, the effect of a ladder. I just thought that this was a beautifully composed photograph with a huge message. The other one that you just showed, I thought was that person I knew. The other people that I chose, I think, were totally new to me. I don't know this photographer.
So this is the Bastien Woot.
Yeah, who apparently is a fairly young Dutch photographer. I went online and saw a brief interview with him. I just find it visually very compelling, very abstract, very stylish.
And very
I'm not
fresh.
particularly interested in fashion photography as a rule. This could be a fashion photograph, but the shapes in it are amazing. So this is one that I really like. I can't remember what else I like, but I couldn't choose.
So that is for me what is exciting about working on this project. Aside from the opportunity to band together as a photographs community and celebrate the history of AIPAD and its many decades of existence, but also in any auction and in any photography fair, you are going to make discoveries. That's the whole point. You find things that you've been seeking for a long time, like Sondra and Celso had been seeking that Cunningham of the unmade bed, which they finally tracked down at Sotheby's in the sale of the Polaroid collection, or you find completely new works that inspire you potentially to collect. For me, there are many works that we have scheduled for the sale, that we've taken on for the sale, that this will be the first time that either Sotheby's is offering them or that they might even have come to the international art market. But that is the whole point of sort of what we're doing here and of what it would be like to have the experience of going to the fair. So because we want to get to our question and answers, I am going to skip around and just ask everyone, and I'll go in order, what is one piece of advice that you would give to a young collector today? So, Denise, what would you say?
Buy it now. Buy it now before it gets more expensive.
That was my alternate title for this talk. So I'm glad you said that.
I remember the great Leonard Vernon once saying to me when he looked back on the early sales that I did at Swan, I remember very vividly his saying, "Why didn't I just buy the whole sale?" Yeah, buy it now before it gets more expensive.
Sondra, what would you say?
I would, well, for the new collector, for somebody that has no experience but wants to form a collection, I would say do not buy a thing for a year. Do nothing but look. Go to every auction, go to every gallery opening of photography, see as much as you can. Because I remember when I started saying, this artist, I don't really like him, but this one's wonderful. Well, I found out that I got bored with the one that looked wonderful, but the one that I thought, I'm not interested. I found it fascinating. So my first advice is the first year, do nothing but go to every gallery, every auction, every place that you can see photographs. And then after the first year, if you can afford it, dip your toe in to some new young to you, photographer that you think has a future. And then just see, look. There's no substitution for that.
Absolutely. And Lee?
Well, in addition to looking, and I think that Sondra's absolutely right. Don't leap right into it, because you need to know more before you buy. But the other thing is that go to places, yes, go to museum shows, but go to, and I realize I'm a dealer and you're an auction person, but going to a gallery and going to an auction house, you have the opportunity to actually look closely at a work of art, a photograph, and you can ask the question directly. There is no stupid question, but you can ask the question directly to the dealer or to the expert if it's an auction house. And there's no other better experience than that. There are loads of books out there. There's now, of course, the internet, but that's not quite the same. But touch the photographs, because the different media, the condition, there are lots of things that go into buying a photograph, especially if you're looking at older work. With contemporary work, there are less differences, but there are nuances. And so I think if you can go and look at a photograph in person, do it.
And if you can't look at a photograph in person because there's a time of COVID and quarantine, call someone, email someone. I know I and probably everyone in this field would love the opportunity to FaceTime with anyone who's interested in photography and have a dialogue, see the work in a little bit more of a three-dimensional sense than a static JPEG. So there are new workarounds, and they're really moving the market and moving the art market in general in a very democratic and global direction. So we have already questions that have piled up, and I know that each of our wonderful panelists could have talked for 45 minutes about any of the questions that I asked. But the first question, Sondra, this is coming to you. Can you please talk a bit about how you dreamed up the Beauty of Lines, the completely extraordinary exhibit you had recently?
Well, believe it or not, I did not dream it up. We had, there was a wonderful photography museum in Switzerland that was run by Titania Frank, who is just the most extraordinary scholar. And she came to us with the idea of doing an exhibition of our collection. But the idea was in the wind. She didn't know what she wanted to do. She didn't know how. She came and she stayed with us at the beginning. She's adorable. It's wonderful that we loved each other because she lived in our house for weeks. She then left with an idea of what she wanted to do. She then came back and spent another few weeks with us finalizing it. And we've had quite a few shows of the collection, but we never tell a curator, we never come with any ideas as to what it should be or how it should be shown, because we get thrilled at the idea of a new eye looking at it. And it's like we never saw our collection as dealing with lines. Never. I mean, we were shocked. How did you see that? But the moment she came up with that, we looked at everything totally differently. Instead of seeing an image, we'd see this or we'd see that. So we find it the most wonderful creative experience for ourselves doing a show with somebody else and having no input. So I have to give Tatiana credit for the whole idea. And then it went from there to Switzerland.
Paris,
Yeah, Switzerland, and then a year in Paris, and then Spain, Barcelona. And what?
Photo Colectania.
Photo Colectania. And as I said, we can't lend it out anymore because it needs a little time to sleep because it was exposed. So it's sleeping very, very happily. But as I said, it was a totally creative and new experience for us.
But that actually leads really well into this next question, and it is a really great one. The missing part of this equation, I suppose, of our topic and of our panel might be the curators. And this era saw the rise of some groundbreaking women curators. How did the entry of women curators change the field for you? And are there any curators who had any sort of special effect or a significance for you specifically? And I open that up to anyone because I'm not sure who would be the best one to address it.
I actually covered that in what I had in thinking about doing this panel. I had thought that really and truly the most progressive, as far as women is concerned, of the groups of interested photography people are the museums and the curators. We have more women curators and have had for some time, but we just have a kind of embarrassment of riches, women curators. And, you know, going back to Maria Morris Hamburg, and of course Ann Tucker, and the other people that this questioner has, those are the two that she mentioned. But there are many, many more. April Watson, Denise and I could probably name 15 women curators out there who have been hard at work doing amazing. Corey Keller with her J.B. Green show.
Liz Siegel at the Art Institute of Chicago.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And so there's a lot being done by women, and much more so than in the dealer world, although there are women who are jumping in, but it just seems as if the museums, of course, the Boston Museum, their whole photography department of curators are women.
Smithsonian.
And it's so the museums are way ahead of AIPAD in that regard.
So I'm going to ask another question while we have time, and I don't know who wrote this in, but I love it. Could each of you tell us about one photograph that captivated your soul? What an amazing idea. Putting you all on the spot. What captivated your soul?
That's really hard.
Denise, is it an anonymous photograph for you?
No, I'm not sure. I mean, people have asked me in the past to talk about who my favorite photographers are, and even that's hard. I've seen and handled too many photographs. I have to think about this one. This is tough.
For me, it would be an anonymous photographer. John and I have collected hidden mothers for years, and for me, that really does touch the soul. The idea of this 19th century mother holding a baby being hidden, the mother being hidden. The reason for taking the picture in the first place, because the baby at that time might not live to be an adult, and then hiding the mother. To me, it's a very small part of the photography market, but it's something that we live with and have been very involved in, and have never tired of thinking about it.
Sondra, is there one photograph that has, in your life, really captivated you?
Well, it is so, I mean, if you ask a question like that, it's almost like asking a mother which one of your children is your favorite. So I have a tendency then to deal with favorites because of how emotionally they're tied up with something in my life. And so I will pick the Mapplethorpe of Bill T. Jones, where his foot is still moving because he couldn't stay still. And the reason I'm choosing that is it was the first photograph Celso and I bought together when we were married. So I'm choosing it. I think it's wonderful. It's one of my most favorites of all the children, which all qualify, but it's because of its emotional resonance to me. That was our first picture, like our first child.
I love that. I love that. Switching gears, we have time for a couple more questions, and apparently a couple more coming in. I'm not sure if anyone will be able to answer this, but do you see, and maybe this is maybe for Lee and for myself, are women of color engaging now in the photography market?
Oh, absolutely. There is a photographer, a dealer, and I'm spacing her name, but she represents one of my choices in this auction.
Arnica Dawkins?
Yes, exactly. Who I met online because she recently received an award from the Griffin Museum and in Winchester, Mass. And when she spoke, I thought to myself, she is somebody to watch. Not a photographer, a dealer, although I think she is also a photographer, but a dealer. She spoke so beautifully about photography. So give her what she deserves. That was a great experience.
Fantastic. So one more question before we wrap up. Is it better to focus on purchasing masterpieces exclusively or purchasing many lesser works by known photographers to tell a story? Also, if that wasn't enough, at what point should you donate to an institution or sell? There's so many questions. They're so good.
Yeah.
That opens up a whole new area, though.
Yeah.
Well, let's just unpack the first one for a second. Masterpiece or many lesser knowns?
I think I'll go to what Sondra and Lee said before about doing a lot of looking. Masterpieces now are relatively expensive in the photo world, and I think you really do need to know what you're buying before you spend money on a masterpiece. So probably for the beginning collector, I would start learning and starting at a lower economic level because, now to make a mistake in connoisseurship for a masterpiece can be very expensive. It can be a very expensive mistake. So I guess I'd say if you're beginning, start small.
So it has been pointed out to me by a watcher, by a guest, a viewer, that I never mentioned my own choice of a photograph that captivated my soul. So I suppose I was also avoiding a very hard question. And I have been with Sotheby's since 2007 and worked with Denise for a long time. And she certainly did instill that you do not choose your favorite child. They're all your favorites. But one of the most remarkable experiences for me personally was a couple of years ago handling the sale of the daguerreotype of Don Quincy Adams. And then really the partnership with AIPAD, I think will really go down for me in the history of what I'm doing as one of the most exciting projects to work on. And there are many photographs within the auction that I think you will find are captivating. And to Denise's point, and to Lee's point, I think, and to Sondra's point, the price ranges within the sale are really fairly accessible, from around $1,000 all the way up to about $50,000. But the vast majority of the auction is really designed to draw in your attention, to get you started, and to show what AIPAD does best, which is education of the market. So with that, I probably am going to close out, unless my guests will allow me to ask one more question. Will you allow one more question? We're at 102. One more question. What would you like to see for the future of collecting photographs, and what do you think will change in the market in the next couple of years?
You're asking another complicated question.
Yeah.
She's good at that.
I love asking the questions.
I think the photo market will keep growing. You know, I think that the virtual world has opened up a whole new world that I'm not sure we're going to give up after the pandemic, and I think that's a good thing. These kinds of online engagements, the ability to connect broadly all across the globe. I don't think we're going to give that up when the pandemic ends. So I think the photographs market will keep going. And I think it is still easily one of the most accessible, and in the broader range of overall art market, one of the most affordable, even for masterpieces, compared to other markets. It's where to be as far as I'm concerned.
100% agree, and that seems like a perfect place to end and to wrap this up. So I will say many, many, many thanks to my brilliant colleagues in the field and the participants in this discussion today. Thank you for your time, and thank you all of you out there on the internet for tuning in. Before we go, a reminder.
Before you end, I think that I should thank you on behalf of AIPAD for doing this. Since I'm the AIPAD connection here, we have all been friends. The auction houses and the dealers, we compete, but we're all good friends, and you're really helping us out, and we really, really appreciate it.
That's very nice. Again, bringing the community together. I think it's really important. So thank you. And a message to our viewers. A reminder, 4 decades in celebration of AIPAD, an auction which will feature works from around 50 of the world's top photography dealers who are AIPAD members, will go online and open for bidding on December 15th. You'll have a preview certainly before then. Bidding will be open from December 15th to the 21st. Please visit SOTHEBY'S.com to learn more about the auction and to learn more about AIPAD. I will say that AIPAD and Sotheby's share a desire to continue educational programs. So certainly AIPAD has programs that will be rolling out, I believe, virtually next year. So check Sotheby's.com. Don't forget to register to bid, and thank you all.